Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. I want to say right off the bat that the Steelers are meeting with Ben Roethlisberger to discuss his return with the team. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm leaning that this isn't a done deal. I haven't seen any comment from Ben himself or the actual Steelers franchise. So right now, all of the talk of this is coming directly from Roethlisberger's agent. And so I think that that's going to be something that we might see some changes in the coming days because they had a meeting. The Steelers are interested in bringing him back. But because it's the agent coming out and saying that it's a done deal, I'm not 100% sold. But what do you think of it, him coming back, Matt?
I think it's a good thing. We've had glimmers over the last couple of years of what the Steelers have been like without Ben in the lineup, and it's been awful. It's been difficult to watch football. So I mean, if they can make his contract work, then and he wants to come back, then obviously I think he should come back.
Because I'll say this, I'm kind of on the fence about him coming back. I'm not 100% against it. I just don't know if he's going to make any changes that would put him in contention that would change any of the way that he's behaved in the past 10 years as basically just a football player. I've seen some things come out about like Tom Brady, how at age 37, he hadn't won a Super Bowl in 10 years. But then if you look around that time, he was changing his diet. He was doing a bunch of other stuff just to get healthy enough to keep basically playing at a high level throughout the playoffs. Ben, we haven't seen that. So, okay, he's working on a contract deal. Number one, we don't have any of the details on that. So the Steelers are already over the cap. If he just takes a cut that just gets them under, I would have no confidence going into this next season for Steeler football.
Hold your horses.
Go
Because
ahead.
look at how many injuries that the defense had last year. When you look at specifically at linebacker, like their linebacker core was depleted, and it showed in the way that they covered passes down the stretch. I think the bigger issue is, as we've talked over the last couple episodes here, it boils down to he comes back. What changes within the locker room? You know, who are those veteran presence people? And I think it starts with Tomlin of what things do they do to try to improve the leadership? Because the collapses down the stretch, it's a leadership issue. It's not a player issue. I think they have the talent that they could win. I think they're a little bit short. Like I feel like where they fall short compared to a lot of the playoff teams is their inability to run the ball when they need to, and they're so heavily reliant on Ben to throw the ball every time and bail them out that it hurts them. Now you can say, "Oh well, it's the offensive line that they're not staying on blocks longer." You could say that because of the reliance on Ben, they don't need as strong of a running game. But look at what Tampa did when they got Fournette. Look at how much more successful teams like Tennessee are with a strong running game. It helps to have that strong running back presence. And Pittsburgh was the Super Bowl contenders. They had the bust. They had Willie Parker. They had running backs that if you needed tough yardage, you could get it done.
But that kind of adds into my point here. They're not going to be able to make changes if they're just going to get Ben's contract right under the salary cap. Like, that's it. You're hoping that the defense gets healthy and is better, but I really don't think they were the problem. The problem is turnovers. And they're not doing anything to address that. Like, teams are making adjustments on Ben, and he hasn't had playoff success in a decade. I mean, for all the shit I talk on Aaron Rodgers, it's kind of the same thing where you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, Green Bay, they're close. The Steelers haven't even been close. So bringing back Ben, like I'm not angry at him, but at some point right now, I feel like he's holding the franchise hostage, and there's nothing they can do. And that's why I wonder if you're seeing a lot of smoke and there's potential that he's still going to get moved because everyone's reporting that he's back 100% now. The contract deals aren't, it's not done yet. And one of the teams that I said to watch out for, the Redskins, they are under fire right now because Alex Smith put out this information about his like coming back and how when he came back, Washington had wanted nothing to do with him. Like they had already moved on. They drafted Haskins. They knew that he had a serious injury that they probably thought he wasn't going to play. And then he came back, and now they're in a weird mix where they have a veteran quarterback. Rivera came out and said that his leadership and his poise and stuff like that is unmatched by anyone in their organization. So they have their hand where are they going to go with Alex Smith? Or are they going to make a move? But I kind of see them both being similar. Obviously, Ben wasn't injured, but would he be able to step into another franchise and like immediately elevate them? I don't want to say to the level that Tom Brady did because that's unrealistic. But Tom Brady won a Super Bowl. I think that's what Ben's ultimate goal is. Otherwise, he's just coming back to what? Maybe win a playoff game, something that he hasn't done in years, Matt.
I think if you're bringing Ben back to be the leader in the locker room, you're going to be unsuccessful in that end. I think when he was playing his best and when they were winning their Super Bowls, they had other players that filled that leadership role. And I mean, to me, one of the bigger issues that they need to address is specifically the wide receivers and the drop passes because that's really what crippled them. I mean, the turnovers hurt, but a lot of times they wouldn't be in those situations if they were catching those short passes and getting them into those short yardage, manageable situations where they weren't so heavily relying on Ben dropping back and throwing deeper passes in predictable situations.
But that's where they're not going to have the flexibility to bring in other offensive weapons. They're not going to do that. And even if they would find a way to get out of his deal, I mean, it could still be a sign and trade where he signs a lesser deal and then they try to move him some other way to get around the salary cap hit. I mean, I'm sure that they're going to still take a hit. I don't know if it's going to be able
Well,
to be negotiated around, but
if they move him, you're looking at like $20 million freed. So hypothetically, even if you had that to clear up, how many players are you going to sign to move the needle? Like you're not going to get that much bang for your buck.
but is one more year of floundering in the playoffs going to be worth it to keep him around when maybe you could start to make moves and try to build for success 2-3 years down the road? I mean, looking at the way the AFC North is, and I know the Steelers just won it, they they're probably in a position where if Ben comes back, the roster stays the way it is, they're not going to have anything built for whenever him to retire. Like they're basically banking on Haskins now as a gamble that might pay off, or Rudolph, or you're just going to draft another quarterback this year, and it's going to be like, why? Like, what are you doing? Because they have to. Because at some point, it's going to be a complete rebuild unless they're able to move some other pieces around. But I don't know. Do you think there are other moves out there that they could make that would move the needle?
Um, I mean, depending on who they pick up in the draft, like I was high on uh, Trey Lance, and I think like he'd be one that obviously he's not in a start right away type role because I I I really think running back just needs addressed. And I think between Clemson's ETN and Alabama's Harris, I think between one of those two, hopefully, will be around when Pittsburgh drafts. And I think those are guys that could help move the needle, getting that running game that they've really lacked the last couple of years. I think that's where they can move the needle. Because when the playoffs hit, you can throw the ball all you want, but if you can't run the ball, then you're not gonna be successful.
I don't know. I'm still negative on the outlook for the team because at this point, I was excited last year whenever they had a chance to make a run. And I know that they played the Browns and the Browns just needed to get over that hump. But if Ben wouldn't have looked so bad as he did down the last 5 games of the season, which very similar to how like Peyton Manning basically bottomed out. But Peyton Manning went to a team that had a rock solid defense with Denver. Ben would need to make a similar move. The Steelers just aren't there right now. Like you said already, they're too reliant on him in the passing game. Like they have no other options. So I'm not even sure what direction they could go unless they were just trying to jump on in. Possibly just do, okay, let's go ahead and let's get this type of run game built around. But I mean
the blueprint's there. The blueprint's there. When they were on their win streak, what did they do? They played great defense. They stole a possession here or there away. They didn't commit turnovers. They didn't have the drops. As soon as the defense got hurt and they had to rely on the offense, they started forcing deeper throws down the field. They had the extra turnovers. They were losing possessions and losing the game. I mean, it's the formula for Pittsburgh is really bland, but it's what's worked for a gazillion Super Bowls. Play good defense, run the football, and win the field goal teams to death.
I feel like they're just hanging on to that last era where you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like the Atlanta Braves when they had Chipper Jones and like they went to all those playoffs, like they won early in his career. And then near the end, they were almost just like, hey, we're not going to try to bring in any like young talent at the third base side until you're ready to go. And then once he retired, they had to do like a complete reset. And it's been years. It took them to finally build back into contention. And so that's where I kind of think the Steelers are. If they make that move to where they tell Ben, like, look, the legacy with you is more important right now. Let's go ahead. Let's have another successful year. We know you're not going to win the Super Bowl. Like, let's be honest. We might have been favorites going in to whatever week 12 last year, but that was a crazy season. Like, all those things aren't going to line up where now you're going to have a preseason. And was he not going to play those games? Because I think that just shortens his caliber throughout the regular season. Like, he's only going to play at a high level for a certain amount of time. And you either have to rotate him or whatever, because like I said, I just don't think he's going to make the adjustments that he needs to make another run. I just don't think he is.
Supposedly he did, because this was the off season where he was they showed the video of him throwing and said he was doing all this extra rehab work. So maybe he is, and just he's never been one to really broadcast to the media what he's doing.
I don't know. Like I said, at some point as a quarterback, you have to lead the leadership in the locker room, though. And he hasn't put that in. And you're saying that it might be Tomlin, but you can bring that level. Like Tom Brady brought that level to Tampa Bay, and he turned their locker room around in 1 year.
Yeah, but that's a different person.
Like, exactly. I think the Steelers might need a different person. That's what I'm saying.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is it can come from other places. It doesn't have to be your quarterback that leadership comes from. I know it's going to sound hypocritical coming off of saying last week that I don't know that bringing in J.J. Watt moves the needle defensively for him, But I think like having someone like that to come in to be a leader, it's they don't have that Hines Ward, Palomalu Bettis type guy in the locker room that's keeping things together.
And let's say his name, Matt, the bad guy, Ray Lewis. I mean, he
Yeah,
was basically the hype man for that Ravens team. It wasn't
you,
Joe
you
Flacco.
yeah, and when you have that kind of motivating factor, but I don't know, is there someone like that defensively that moves the needle?
I mean, it would have
I
to be
don't know.
J.J. Watt, not on the team right
That,
now.
yeah, but I mean, like we were saying about trying to acquire somebody. I mean, because I think with they haven't if they're negotiating with Ben and they're bringing him back, then obviously they're going to have to negotiate to get the cap space for to sign their draft picks, and depending on what that looks like, I mean, they potentially could bring someone. I mean, it would take some. I wouldn't say gifting, but it would have to take some restructure, like some creative deals to be a win now situation that
And
I
that's
think is better
where,
that I think is better suited for them, to be honest, because they're in a. I don't think they have to completely blow everything up right now, but they definitely need to do enough to move the needle right now, and it starts with leadership right now in the locker room.
well, that's where I think if they don't, the defense is young enough, and then you're going to have the big contracts come up for them. But then you're going to have a while where you have a good defense or a great defense, hopefully, and then you're struggling with your offense because you put all your chips into this ancient quarterback basket where, I mean, like, it just doesn't work out. I mean, the Colts got Phillip Rivers. They had a good season out of him, but that was like a 1 year stopgap. And I mean, they traded for Carson Wentz, and that's a crazy deal because I don't even think that that's going to work out in their favor. I've seen some Eagles fans talk about how the Eagles are going to regret that deal. And I don't even know if we talked about it last week on the show. I can't remember when it came through, but I was like thinking the Eagles already let the guy that took them to the Super Bowl go. And then he ran into two bad situations. And I mean, watch the Eagles, like they could bring him back if they really wanted to. But it was clear that Jalen Hurts was moving the ball when he was in the game last year. Wentz wasn't doing that. Like you can easily just give an eye test and see, okay, who's moving the ball. Like it's clear right now that Ben moves the ball for the Steelers. And so bring him back. But I'm not going to make a prediction that they're going to win the AFC North or win the Super Bowl. Like that would just be crazy. Like there's nothing that I've seen with this team, even during their undefeated run, where I thought like, all right, this is going to be the team that turns it around. And I think you've seen it the past couple of years, like 2 years ago, even without Ben, losing to the Raiders or teams you're not supposed to lose to. So I could see that being thrown on Tomlin then, because at some point Ben's there. He's not even the years he's not playing, they're not turning it around. And some of that stuff is locker room leadership. And right now, it's what? The end of February? Stuff's going to open up within the next, what's the actual first start of the date? It's March something. Let's see if I can find it. Because that's when we're going to start to see if, is it March 1st? Is that the operation date?
That sounds right.
Yep. Oh, no, wait, that's just the important date. That's just the draft date. So that's a deadline for the college football to notify about the draft is March 1st. So they don't even have it on their website from what I've seen here, because this is NFL.com for upcoming events. The last one was February 7th. Um, maybe it's more, I think, well, here's according to the Browns website, it's March 17th. It says the new year league year begins at March 17th. So that probably gives them a couple weeks. College players have to declare so teams can kind of get their draft boards in order, because like that would make a big deal. I know like Trey Lance is going to probably come out, right? Was he a senior?
Junior, but he's been in that discussion that he's gone.
Because like I could see that being a situation where they're saying, okay, we're like really high on Lance, but then he decides to go back to college or whatever. Because the college this year is strange because you can go back no matter what your status is. There's a couple players that, like, if you're a senior, even if you're a grad senior or whatever, you can still come back because of the coronavirus and how many teams were shut down and missed games. So I think most of the draft stuff, if anything, in years past, it's probably pretty much settled. There's always one or two surprises at the end. I think a lot of people coming out early usually take bad information from family or whoever's pushing them, agents, and then you see guys that don't get drafted. But this is the one year where it might be crazy, and I wonder if it's going to backload a draft in a year or two. So maybe the Steelers could look at that too and say, let's give it one more try. Who cares if it works out? Maybe we can get some picks down the road and then know that the coronavirus is going to mess up this draft a bit. And you might be able to have a loaded draft in a year or two because of it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't see a lot of people talking about that, but I know that if I was a GM, that's one of the things that I would be looking at. Like this year, you don't know. There's always players that play their full season and go move up the draft board or down the draft board. And so with a lot of leagues like the Pac-12, not really playing, not really being on TV, you don't have guys that maybe made their junior year jump. They didn't get that bump anymore. So now they're going to come back for one more year, and you're going to have more of those guys because they are going to be with the transfer portal. There are going to be openings. Players are going to transfer to other teams where they can be the star, and you're going to finally see what they do. And so next year, and I think the year after, you're going to see some of the effects of that lockdown. This year's draft, you don't have the extra game film. So some people, you're going to say, oh, so-and-so is high on the draft board because of what we saw him do 2 years ago. Some players don't put in the work. Some players just bought him out. I had a story up. Tennessee Titans, Isaiah Wilson, he was a tackle, 5-star. I think he was one of the highest rated linemen because I remember Michigan was in on him in recruiting. He went to Georgia and came out. They selected him in the first round. Basically a bust. The GM, was it the GM or the owner? Let's see. General manager John Robinson said that he has to make a determination if he wants to play pro football. That's on him. And Isaiah Wilson came out and said that he's done with football as a Titan. And then he deleted it. But that's crazy because if you're trying to build your team around, you think, okay, here's a guy that was going to be a stud on a team. Maybe we can go ahead and give him the practice that he needs to reach that high level. And instead, just a bust. I mean, what can you do as a franchise? I think you're going to see a lot more of that this year because the year was crazy. Some kids handled it better than others. You really didn't see any surprises in terms of teams making the playoffs or anything. I think it's the same couple teams in college football every year. So you didn't get the extra film because of bowl games not being played that you would from some of the smaller schools. I mean, people from they know what the Ohio State players are going to do in the NFL. Same with Clemson at this point. Alabama, they know what they're getting. But those other schools, those players didn't get that, they didn't get the extra exposure. So I think you're going to see a lot more busts like this. And I would also put out there that I think you're going to see a lot of late round draft picks actually stick this year. And so kind of like how they always bring up, Tom Brady was taken in the 6th round. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some people taken in the 5th, 6th round that end up being Pro Bowlers. Just because teams are like, you know what, I'm going to take a flyer on this guy and see what happens. And just because of the weird year not being able to show out, you're going to see some guys that make that jump. So that's my prediction. You have anything for the NFL?
No, I don't think.
I did have one other thing that I wanted to mention. That Tennessee, the state, they started to legalize sports gambling. And there's a big controversy right now that there were how many more? 74 betting accounts that were making illegal bets during the Super Bowl. And so they're saying that the books themselves are not under investigation, but some of them have declined comment, so they don't know. And they said like the Tennessee Lottery has been watching it. But that's where you have so many books, you don't know how many people are playing bets. And with doing like the digital ones, I've said on the show before, you don't know. Like the FanDuel and whatever, they've been caught in the past faking accounts and having it rigged against you. So with you normally with straight up sports gambling, it's usually easier. Like you know that you're going to go ahead and place a bet. I don't know if it was an actual gambling thing, but I saw one of there was like a pick 'em from Fox Sports maybe, where you had to pick the percentage that you thought that the players were going to shoot in a basketball game as like a prop bet, but the percentages didn't line up. So you could bet on 0 to 34% or 35 to like 50%. But if the player was shooting like 34.4%, like they would call it a wash, which is like a weird glitch you would think. And they were like stopping payouts because of it. But like if you're gambling like straight up real money, I would think that people would be pissed because you would think that it would either round up or round down to the 34 or 35.
Yeah.
But who knows? So I think that as as states start to legalize sports betting, you're going to see more things like that. So just be careful where you put your money. There's like no safe. If you're using like DraftKings or whatever, they're not safe. Look into them. Do your due diligence. So I wanted to bring that up because I know we have some gamblers listening to the show. And I would hate to see people lose their money when they think they have a winning bet only to find out something happened. There's no additional information, so I don't know for sure. It could have been people just hedging their bets at high amounts with parlays that paid out because they try to look for that if they did an algorithm and figured like, hey, if we make this parlay 3 different ways, we're going to come out on top every time or however many ways they need it. That could have been what they're looking at, like a reverse parlay, but I don't know. We'll see. So keep an eye on that for those out there that are gambling. I still think fantasy sports is a little bit like the daily one. It's very risky. There was one other one that I didn't bring up at the time, but they were looking into a couple, like I think it was a husband and wife, where they were betting like hundreds of lineups each other, like they each were, to get around like the lineup limit. And then they were winning like some of the big pots because they had it figured out where they knew like we're going to pick 200 of the top lineups and we're most likely going to win. So unless you're putting that type of preparation in, you're not going to win because there are people out there doing it. Non-football, did you see the Tiger Woods thing, Matt?
I saw a little bit.
So 7:00 in the morning, I actually got an alert from like not EA Sports, CBS Sports. I didn't even know that I had an alert set up, but it was like Tiger Woods seriously injured, and I was like, all right, this can't be like a golf thing because it was early enough that I don't think it was at 7, but it was sometime after. But the initial report was like I think it was LAPD. I think we have the actual statement. They came out early in the morning to a single vehicle accident, Los Angeles County. So LASD, not LAPD. There was a single vehicle rollover, traffic collision outside of, I'm not going to give his location. You can find it if you really want to. And the vehicle sustained major damage. And so I guess they tested him to see if he was drunk, which I would have been surprised if he was out driving drunk at 7 in the morning or if he was impaired, which he wasn't. But dude, I'll tell you, it has to be so scary driving these days. Like that's one of the things with like working remote and stuff now. Like that's the one thing I don't miss because there are so many people out there that don't watch what they're doing. And I don't know what Tiger's like situation was. It could have been anything. Like could have hit. I don't know if it was icy where he was. Could have hit something. They said there were no skid marks, so it looks like he just drove off the road. But some roads don't even have like a berm. Like in Pennsylvania, I think that a lot of them do have it built in to plow the snow. But down here in the South, so there are some roads that are so tight that you have to be careful because it only takes a turn like a little bit the wrong way before your tire hits off there, and he's in a big SUV, just starts rolling, and it could have screwed him. So prayers to him. I hope he's safe. And wow, you never want to see that. Because the scary thing with a single vehicle, like what if no one can come to your aid? Because like who knows where he's driving? What if no other car saw him because he was like in the woods and he couldn't reach his phone? Like they said he was awake and he had 2 crushed legs.
It's a scary situation.
Yeah. I mean, imagine, like that just had to be brutal. Like just sitting there and just hoping. I mean, maybe his phone was all right. Maybe it was in his pocket or something. He was able to get in, call for help. But I hope he's all right. I know he was trying to get like the title for the most championships. I would be shocked if he was able to pull that off now. But scary stuff. Never want to see that. So if you're driving out there, make sure you're not on your phone or anything because you never know. The spring football, though, getting back into football. Spring football is beginning in college football. I don't want to forget this, so I'm going to bring this up. The contract for some of the stuff that Texas paid for Sarkisian is starting to come out like going into spring football. They're giving him 20 hours a year for personal use of their private jet. It's like, what have you seen from Sarkisian where he needs all these extra perks? Like Texas was betting, like they were hiring him and bidding him up against no one. No one was even trying to hire him. He wasn't even mentioned in any of the boards. And so, like, if you're a fan of Texas going into spring football, your excitement level has to be low. I mean, you might think, okay, we got some new blood. We know our team's going to be talented. Sarkisian wasn't lighting it up at USC, and his teams were more talented than what he has. So you're basically betting on the Nick Saban school of coaching. How many of those coaches have worked out, Matt?
Jimbo.
1. And how long was he even there, though? Was he there at LSU?
Yeah.
And then he went to Bobby Bowden, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not like he went right from Nick Saban and got picked up and then started to win championships. He won 1. And that could have just been Jameis Winston, you know. I mean, no one gives Gene Chizik credit for that Cam Newton national championship. Just saying.
Well, you're not lying. The stats were definitely in Jameis's favor in that argument.
Because some guys, you're looking at what Johnny Manziel did with Kevin Sumlin, and you have to think, because I think he was the coach, right?
Yep.
You have to think, what if he played for a better coach? Like how good would Johnny Manziel have been? We'll never know. Because Kevin Sumlin's, he's bombing out. He did worse at Arizona than Rich Rod did.
That's a bold statement.
Why is that bold? Should I bring up Arizona history? I don't know what the actual thing was. But this is the kind of college football talk that I bring to the show. I make an outlandish statement based on my memory, which I'm thinking is probably pretty good at this point. But what was his stats here at Arizona? Matt, Kevin Sumlin was 9-20 at Arizona. He finished 6th twice, and he tied for 3rd. That was his best year. So my man Rich Rod, he was 43-35, a winning record. They finished first 1 year. The rest of the year is not too good, but they went to the Fiesta Bowl. So winning record, He only had one losing year. That was 2016. Kevin Sumlin never had a winning season. So, point for me. I'm pretty sure that qualifies as being a much better coach. And now Rich Rod, he's doing the Nick Saban thing, although he went somewhere else, though. Where's he at these days? He's at Louisiana Monroe. He's doing the video games route where you just pick a new school and try to bring them up.
Oh, okay.
He's not even the head coach, though. You know who the head coach is, Matt?
Who?
Your man, Terry Bowden.
That's right.
So wouldn't that be funny if that worked out? The Bowden boy comes back. Florida State will be looking for a new head coach in a few years, so he can just smooth right in.
Hopefully not. Hopefully Norvell's going to be there for a while.
I don't know. I saw the did I leave it up or did I exit out? So the ACC started to do their preliminary predictions. And, of course, I closed it out. Let me see if I can find it. They only had Clemson as the clear favorites. Then they had Miami and NC State as contenders and maybe North Carolina. But I'm not going to be able to find it now. So I was like, oh, that's kind of weird that you would just put, I know like you're just picking teams that were kind of close, but I haven't seen a big jump from NC State where I would say, you know what, they're going to be in the conversation. I found it here. So let's see. Miami, North Carolina, and NC State are the favorites to pressure Clemson going into their spring football like little thing. Let's see if they have anything on Florida State. Nope. Nothing on Florida State.
As I expected.
So they're coming in much lower expectations into spring ball. But what are you excited for?
Originally, I was really excited at the idea of seeing some of the more interesting programs. Like, for example, a lot of my offense is based off of what's being run at Tennessee Tech. And I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity that I can actually sit down and watch some of their games this spring because of the similarities in offensive philosophy. It's like, oh, this will be cool. Do I watch it? No. There's like bowling and random college basketball games on that no one has any interest in. I thought, oh, okay, well, they're not going to, like, Tennessee Tech's kind of an obscure school. Like, I can understand not showing them. What about defending national champion North Dakota State? They're playing Youngstown State. That would be a game that could be on ESPN Plus. Like, bump some of those other games and put the football on. We've been through the numbers enough. The football sells. And if they really want to squash out any of the other professional leagues, that's the way that they backdoor it. Prop up these lower level college games. Definitely would be a market for it. Get those smaller schools the big exposure on TV. It's a win-win situation.
But I'm glad you brought up the ESPN Plus thing because that's what I was going to say. I hope that they put more things on there. Because right now, YouTube TV or whatever it was started as like a cheap alternative where you get the best of the best channels. And then over the years, Google has no idea what people actually want. They keep bundling in these small channels that no one cared about in the first place. Like they're just bending the knee. And they're adding them in and then people are cord cutting again. They're like, we're not going to pay for YouTube TV. So YouTube TV is going to go the route that all of other Google's products go. It'll be around, they'll try to roll it into something else, and then it will be gone. And I'm hoping that ESPN has enough infrastructure where they're able to just do a competitor. Like one of the things, I don't know if we talked about it on here, but the NHL is looking to get out of NBC and their contract. And it's something that I've been begging for a while. Because with the way it's set up, they're on NBC. A lot of their games are on NBC Sports. You can't watch it even on the NHL TV app, which is awful. And I heard it's tough to even get out of that app if you're paying for it separately. But a lot of their games aren't even on. Like, who has their championship Like the NBC has like the Stanley Cup, and they put what 2 games at least minimum on their cable TV channel, like NBC Sports, just to keep it relevant. So when they talked about that channel dying, I was loving it because now they're gonna what put the games on like USA or something else, like where their plans are, and it's just ridiculous. Like people just want to watch it, and I we've talked about it on the show. 10 years ago, in my apartment, we used to be able to watch any football game we wanted. Like, why did that change? It's just because TV networks started to pay for like their rights and locked out a lot of the streaming. And then whenever Twitter tried to buy in like streaming rights, and even like I think Amazon Prime pays for some of the NFL ones that are separate, because like the TV guys, they're all set in like the ancient mindset of, oh, we have to pay by ads, where Amazon's like, all right, you do that, and we're going to do our own thing and stream over here because you're not streaming. And then I know that they have thousands of people watching at least, because I watch my games there because it's easier than paying for a thing, and a lot of them are free anyway. But for college football, if I'm ESPN right now, I would be calling like North Dakota State saying like, look, we can't pay top dollar because of all the cuts we've been having to do and firing everybody, but they're going to go ahead and they're going to broadcast Missouri Valley Conference, the Southern Conference, the Big South, OVC, and at least other FCS football games this spring. And so, perfect. It's only $5 a month. So you get some basketball games. The one thing that I thought that they could do better is put on like some of the basketball games that, like you said, people don't even get a chance to see. Or try to put on like some smaller schools where, okay, I get it that the Big Ten, you're not going to get, I'm not going to be able to watch all the Michigan games on one channel. Like there are too many people throwing money around. Fox is going to be throwing money around. They were just on CBS again over the weekend. They're throwing money around. ESPN's going to pick up the scraps. Like you might be able to see Michigan play Rutgers, and that's fine. But there are other conferences, like you said, like North Dakota State, they're a big enough name that they should have all of their games somewhere. So if you're a fan, pay for ESPN Plus. Much better than the Big Ten Network, I'll tell you that. Because at least they're in one spot and you can watch them. And so you should just start tweeting at them, Matt. Anytime there's a game on that you want to watch and you can't watch, tweet at ESPN, tell them to pick it up. You can bundle them right now with like Disney Plus and Hulu, and it's only like $13 a month or whatever. They might be raising. It's like 13 or $14 for all three. Then you can watch all your sports. I mean, there are hockey games on there that I get to watch now that normally you would think like, okay, maybe I'll just throw this on because I don't want to pay for NHL TV. Get to watch some sports. So to me, it's perfect. I was against kind of ESPN Plus at the beginning, but there are still some things that like I wish they could just come out and say, all right, Big Ten Network, you're not going to put on any softball games. We're going to just put them on ESPN Plus then. Like the network's already there. They're already recording the games and putting it on like whatever random website that each sport athletic department has. Like why not just let them on ESPN and let people watch them? And then ESPN splits the ad revenue or whatever else they get because they still show you ads, even though you're paying for the network. So they also make double the money. That's why it's so cheap. So that's my little rant. But I'm glad you brought that up because right now, if you want to watch football, there's like nowhere to go. The other one would have been like the NFL Network because didn't they used to show games?
Occasionally they were doing some. I mean, to me, that would have made sense too.
Because that's the big thing. At some point, if you're going to expand the sport, you have to start showing games, talking about your team. And I mean, I have one other topic on the board today. And Notre Dame, they opted out of EA Sports College Football. And it ties right in here because you have kids growing up that they have never seen Notre Dame be successful. I mean, let's be honest, Matt. They grow up and they're seeing Notre Dame and they see like, okay, they're undefeated, but they play a week schedule that's like whatever. They just play a week schedule. And then everyone's like, well, Notre Dame, no, they picked their own schedule. It's tough. And it's like, then why didn't it prepare you for the playoffs? Like, why are you continuously getting your ass kicked every time you're in a big bowl game? You haven't
Well, we
won
know
one
why
big.
that is.
What, Matt?
I said we know why that is because Notre Dame has high academic standards. It's the same reason why Northwestern struggles in the Big Ten. Is when you have the higher academic standards, you can't. There's some of those athletes that you just can't reach.
Matt, Pat Fitzgerald has won some bowl games. I'm pretty sure.
And so has Brian Kelly. He just hasn't won a national championship, although he has appeared in one.
But has he won big time bowl games? Because Notre Dame hasn't won a big time bowl game in like decades. Brian Kelly, these are the bowls he's won, Matt. Camping World, Citrus, Music City, Pinstripe, and the Sun. You could say, okay, the Citrus is all right, but Harbaugh won that one. So are you really going to go ahead and put that up on a high level? He's lost the Orange Bowl, the Champ Sports Bowl, the BCS National Championship game. That was the big beatdown. They lost the Fiesta. He's lost the Cotton Bowl, and he's lost the Rose Bowl. He's going for the reverse sweep, Matt, where not only do you make the big 6 games, whatever the hell they're calling them, you lose them all. Because he gets his pick. He's like, you know what? Have we lost the Peach Bowl, the Sugar Bowl? Like, which one's still around? Put us in that one next year because we got to get that on our. I can get the hat that says I coached in that game. So I don't know. Now let's look at Pat Fitzgerald because his is probably similar. He hasn't got to play in the big time games, but he's also won a Citrus Bowl, Matt. So basically, Pat Fitzgerald and Brian Kelly maybe are onto something by comparing them because they are the same level. He won that He won that this year when they were 7-2.
So there you go.
But he's also won Holiday, the Music City. That's another one in common. The Pinstripe. They've won a lot of the same bowls, Matt. So what you're telling me is Brian Kelly is basically Pat Fitzgerald. The same level of success at the same level of school, right?
There you go.
Because like going back, I don't know, but you would think that there'd be in some big games. They put it out there. But like I was saying, it's a lot harder to recruit. You bring up the academic standings. But what about the performance? Like people are seeing them, okay, they beat Clemson. I think everyone knew this year that Trevor Lawrence was out. They replayed and it was a beatdown. And then everyone was like shocked. They're like, well, what happened? Like we thought it was going to be a close game and Notre Dame would back into the playoffs. Not so fast, my friend. Very, very overrated team again. And so now you're going to cut off one of the things where every young kid that's into football played college football video games. I know kids that just had a system and only had that game and maybe Madden and then maybe a basketball game or something, depending on what sports they were in. But that was like the only game you had to buy a year. Like very easy for parents to say like, okay, here, have Merry Christmas. Here's your new football game. Or I know they come out in the summer, but you can usually get them on discount for Christmas. So families that had trouble affording stuff, boom, you get the college football game, you get the system, whatever game comes with it. And then your kid was going to play that. And that was going to be their introduction to the sport. And now you have big time schools that are going to be trying to get in here because they're taking a stance where Notre Dame doesn't want to be into a football game until the players get paid for being in that game. But the players aren't going to be in the game. They're supposed to be just doing random rosters. And if I were them, I would just try to do historical rosters. You could take like a historical, like whatever the average is for Notre Dame, and just randomly generate a roster, like based on, okay, these are usually their averages or whatever. And Nick, and you probably easily find that just by importing like spreadsheets of like draft data or whatever. And then they're going to go ahead and say like, that's their team. This is what Notre Dame usually looks like. That's going to be them. Boom, see what happens. But Notre Dame's like, no, we're not going to be a part of it. And I wonder what other schools are going to drop out. Like, I hope Michigan doesn't drop out because that's such like, I don't even know. It's such a self harm that you could do for your school because it's such easy marketing that they're going to see ads. People are going to be streaming it on like Twitch or whatever. And it's basically just a free ad for your school. And ESPN, or not ESPN, EA Sports also pays you. So it's not even like free. You're getting paid to be in an advertisement. That's all Madden is now. Madden is basically a big advertisement for NFL football and like whatever else they show on there. So Notre Dame, awful decision. Their fans have to be pissed because like now you get to watch like, oh, let's see our biggest rivals play. Oh, I can fire up the game and hopefully Michigan's in it and maybe USC and I can play a game and just stream it online. And Notre Dame fans would have to be pissed because they're like, we're not a part of this now. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm a little bit surprised because I thought that they would be one of the ones that would be pushing more for it. But I guess they wanted to make sure. I would think that part of the reason I thought that Notre Dame opted out was because they wanted to make sure that players were paid first, or that the players were being compensated. It was like, if you're that worried about it, take whatever proceeds you're going to get from it, and just put it into some kind of package to give the players when they're done.
And I feel like they're putting pressure on it, not like basically hoping that the game is going to be out after all of like the lawsuits and stuff are done. But I realistically don't see that happening within the next couple years. Like I think the state of Michigan already has it, and Florida, and maybe California. Like there's a couple states. I know Florida and Michigan for sure, since we talked about it on the show. Both said like by a certain date, we're going to start paying players, and the NCAA is going to either have to say that we're not allowed to participate or like not. Like, could you imagine this year if like Michigan, a clear top basketball school, was just not able to participate in the NCAA tournament because of like whatever, because they were paying players? Like that would be so unheard of. The NCAA would immediately bend the knee. They would say, you know what, never mind. Never mind. Come on in. Like we can't have anyone, because it would be a disgrace if Michigan runs through the Big Ten right now. They only have one loss, which is considered the best conference in the country at this time. They go through it maybe with one loss, maybe two losses. Who knows how the last couple games are going to go. And then the NCAA tournament happens and they're like, no way. And then you have like a 5-loss champion from some other team. Michigan could just claim that as a championship. And then the entire basketball tournament would be devalued. And everyone would be like, okay, that's why I think the NCAA would immediately turn around and say, okay, those guys are allowed to play. And then immediately you're going to have unbalanced rosters or whatever until it's consistent around the league. So I think it would take maybe an extra year or two. But what if EA Sports comes out with their game first? Like Notre Dame's going to be missing a clear recruiting tool. People are going to make edits. I would assume you're going to have customizable rosters. So when the players come in, I've seen some of the recruiting shows like from like a decade ago where people would come in and they would have them play the video game as themselves because they would have the fight song and you can kind of see it running out into like the fake crowd. I've even seen it with like VR headsets. Some schools, I think it was South Carolina, had something like that when Spurrier was there, where they had like an experience where you could run out and they would call you like your name and have like your fake profile that they already do, show your picture and like some highlights from you to like give you, okay, this is what it's going to be like when you come out. So to just not have that recruiting tool, it's almost like a big misstep by them. I don't know how else to put it. But I think that was my last big thing that I had. I know the college football stuff, if you want to watch it, it's available. It's going to be hard to watch. It's not going to be on cable. Was that where you were looking for the games?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to join the dark side, Matt, and just get into streaming. Go into it. You can find it. I wouldn't even be surprised if some of those other schools, like the smaller ones, still stream the games like on their own websites. The only downside to that is a lot of them you also have to pay single. And that's why I was surprised. Like I mentioned some of the conferences that signed an agreement with like ESPN Plus, but I think it'd be a lot easier for like, let's say the Southern Conference as an example. They just said like, look, we know we're not going to be on TV, but if you want to pay us $5, you can watch all of our games through the Southern Conference website. Like I think that they would make some money, at least from alums or whatever that know, like, hey, you know what, I'm never going to be able to watch a game, but maybe I'll watch it. I've seen a lot of like lower tier basketball schools do that, like D2, where they're like, you know what, I'm just going to throw our basketball games up. You can pay. It's kind of like a donation. Instead of paying for a ticket to come into the game, just pay for the yearly stream and just watch them at home. And so I think you could have exposure that takes off, but is it going to be worth it to set it up? I mean, I guess if you're using it as a recruiting tool where you're telling families like, hey, your son's going to play here and you're going to be able to watch all of their games at home, like I think that could be a big thing. And I'm surprised more schools aren't taking that approach. Maybe they need to talk to me, Matt. I can hook them up. I can get them some game plans to help promote themselves. Because I
There
would
you
think that,
go.
that'd be a good way that you could do it within the NCAA rules. Like you're a smaller school, you need to recruit some guys, you want their family to feel safe, tell them they can watch every game at home if they can't make it in. It's a win-win.
It's a good ploy.
All right, you got anything else? College football stuff? I can't remember if you did or not.
There was one last thing, and it's probably actually leading into my final bell. But I was surprised over the weekend that LeVar Arrington came out and had some pretty strong comments in regards to Jay Paterno, who's on Penn State's Board of Trustees. Apparently, they were voting on upgrading the football facilities, and he had voted against it, saying that he felt like that money could have been used to support general students and didn't really need to be going into upgrading the football facilities at this time. And Arrington said, well, if you were the head coach, you definitely would be trying to pull that money in. And there's nothing that helps support the school more than the football program because of the ability to sell out the crowds when there are crowds allowed at the games. And he's like, if this is a move to like purposely try to undermine James Franklin, then this is a problem. So it is pretty much what was calling him out, thinking that he was trying to cut out James Franklin by cutting some of his funding.
And that's interesting because Paterno, they weren't sad whenever their names were all over the university. But again, it is a crazy time. So I'm kind of torn on this one. Where, yeah, maybe now's not the best time to be building a facility. Like, let's be honest. Some schools are like announcing big time projects. It's like, why? I think Cincinnati announced some stuff as like part of their plan to keep Fickle, where they announced a contract and they announced like 3 new buildings. And I saw a lot of alums were like, it was trending like negatively on Twitter. And I was like, yeah, of course people are going to be pissed. You're talking about having like scholarships cut and things like that. And then all of a sudden you're like saying, okay, never mind. Like we can go ahead and get a new football facility within the next 3 years, like the indoor practice and stuff. And I understand sometimes you need the practice facilities, but you could pick a better time to do it. I mean, I don't know, because some of the money though is earmarked, and if it's from a donor, it's hard to get around some of those paying rules. But I will say this: I saw a proposal where if the paying player, since we were talking about it with Notre Dame, and I brought up the Texas thing earlier. I should have had it connected in my notes because it all kind of goes together. Where they're like giving Sarkisian all these perks and talking about how they're going to invest into Texas football. When they start paying players, one of the proposals was that you couldn't build facilities like if it wasn't like a required thing. So like you build your indoor facility, that's it. You can't rip it down and build a new indoor facility. That money would have to be pushed to the actual athletes. And so like you could do like your honest repairs. And I know that there's going to be some like finagling where you're like, oh yeah, this building definitely is rotting, but we need to definitely rip this wall out and put up these new locker rooms, lockers with high definition TVs and Beats headphones. Like I know you're still going to have that, but outside of just the proposal itself, like it seems like they're looking for ways to limit the frivolous spending by some of the universities. So don't be surprised if a lot of other universities just push through crazy changes right now, where they're like, you know what, we're going to get ahead of this and we're going to build some major facilities right before this passes, because then it'll kind of lock them in. And because everything, like I said, is going to take a couple years. So don't be surprised if like Cincinnati's new indoor facility is also like a mini golf course or something like just crazy. Because like Clemson has a bunch of things like that other universities don't have, and they're all trying to play catch up. So we'll see. I'm not sure if it actually pays into recruiting, because like I said, Clemson has been putting stuff like that in, but they didn't really start making recruiting bumps until they were in the playoffs and winning a couple national championships. And then it still took a few years to break through like the blue blood. Hey, we're just hanging out here. Don't mind us. Come play for us easy. So, I don't know. You got anything else for the show?
Nope, that's it.
Yeah. I was watching some college football, like I said, about Michigan on Sunday. And I just wanted to bring up that apparently it's not just the Big Ten, because I texted you, but the ACC is looking at it too, where now they don't know how to decide the basketball champion. It's like, why wouldn't you just use winning percentage? Like any other route is going to penalize teams where they were saying, like, we don't know if we're going to use that. We might use whoever has the most wins, which immediately penalizes whichever school, like if you had a coronavirus outbreak or whatever. Like Michigan shut down, and I talked about it on the show last week. They said none of their players tested positive. Like the state shut them down. They had no control over it. It wasn't like some of the college football programs where they kept having people test positive and positive, like Ohio State. And then the Big Ten's like, oh, you know what? You only played a couple games. You're definitely in the championship. But now for basketball, they're like, whoa, let's take another look at this. Maybe we'll see who has the least amount of losses, which is another weird thing that benefits Michigan. But it's like, why use that? If you're going to go with like a weird, oh, let's see who has the lowest amount of losses, I think that's what the ACC had mentioned they might do. It's like, why? The team, that's going to benefit the team that played the least amount of games because they have the least amount of chances of losses, right? Like at that point, just go for winning percentage like every normal person would think. So that's my end rant. I don't know. It was ridiculous. Michigan definitely took down Ohio State, though, at home. And so Ohio State didn't even move in the rankings. Like Ohio State was at home. They should have got that home bump. Michigan had a gigantic lead at the end there. It was like 10 points at one point in the final couple minutes. And then Ohio State hit some threes to try to bring it back. And because of free throw stuff, like they almost did have a chance to come back, but couldn't pull it off. And now the Big Ten protecting themselves because they only care about the money. They had to make Ohio State get in the playoffs to get that playoff check. And I think right now they're thinking, okay, if we do some weird championship thing where we can split a couple champs, maybe they'll get number one seeds and they can bring us extra money by making it further in the tournament. Like you can't convince me that that's not how the Big Ten is thinking here. I don't think they're out to screw Michigan. I think they're looking at it by saying, if we screw Michigan, maybe Ohio State or Illinois gets that one seed. Although Illinois lost to Michigan State last night, so they're hurting themselves. But they're probably thinking, let's screw Michigan, try to benefit Ohio State here, and then they'll both get one seeds, and maybe one of them can get to the Final Four and get us that extra paycheck, Matt. Because you know it's all about the money.
All about the money.
That's my final thing. It's like people are like, why does it seem like the refs are cheering for Ohio State? I'm like, it wouldn't even matter. Michigan could be playing Rutgers right now, and if Rutgers was ranked number 4, they'd be thinking the same thing. Like we could take Michigan down a peg or two. they only have one loss. Like they can easily deserve two. They can take 2 or 3 losses and they'll still be fine. But Rutgers can't. So let's hurry up and help them out. And I think that's how they think. Like, let's get all the teams in, collect those monies, and then that's going to be it. So that's my final bell. Hopefully basketball doesn't get shut down, because that would be crazy. Again, 2 years where Michigan has a great team, and then they could get screwed by not having a tournament, which is my final bell. I did have one more thing. I don't know if you saw this. So the NCAA is going to let fans into the bubble for the tournament.
Ooh, bold strategy.
Why have the bubble? If all the teams are staying at the same place and there's an outbreak, guess what, Matt? The entire tournament shuts down. Whereas if you had different bubbles, like the Midwest one might shut down, but the South one can still play, and then those teams can just go on rest until the following weekend. Like if you had to miss a week, it's like poor planning by these guys. Like they don't think. Like they're like, well, what can we do? Like we're panicking, Matt. We haven't had a whole year to come up with a plan. Our plan is to put everyone right here, and then we got to let fans in, right? Oh yeah, we can do that. No big deal. No big deal.
Well, there is the vaccine out, so you'll be fine. But as I was looking at the AP Top 25, you have Gonzaga, Baylor, Michigan in the top 3. That between the 3 of them, there's 1 loss. Then you have a bunch of 5-loss teams. And then way down at 11 is Florida State at 13-3, stuck behind 1, 2, 3, 4, like 7 teams with 5 or 6 losses, but hold them back because the defending national champs are going to be in it to win it come 20 time.
You know why, Matt? Because they're not Ohio State. Ohio State's 18-5, baby. They're first of the 5 loss. Not a team like Villanova, 14-3. You know, a team with actual success recently, 2 national championships. Like, nah, that can't be for real. Ohio State, though, they're in, baby. We've seen the 6-foot mask poster with Jim Tressel on one side and Urban Meyer on the other, showing you how far away you had to stand from each other. Did you see that?
No.
That's the poster. I'll see if I can find it. I'll text you for sure. Maybe I'll put it on Twitter. But they have a poster where it's like Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel. You need to stay 6 feet apart to be champions of life. That's basically what the poster said. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's it. Florida State's down there with their true rival, Houston, Matt. 3-loss teams. Right. But, all right. That's it for the show. We'll be back next week. Definitely tell your friends. Check it out. We're still getting big downloads, so we appreciate that. And so even some of the video stuff, which we'll probably get some more stuff on here, but I just haven't really done it because with everything being shut down, it's been crazy. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.